The battlefield stretched for miles, a desolate plain scarred by fire, shattered metal, and broken bodies. Smoke drifted lazily across the sky, tinted red by the setting sun. The air was thick with heat, dust, and the acrid smell of burned fuel. For weeks, this field had been the site of a brutal war. A war between species that had never known mercy. Yet now at last it seemed that one side had emerged victorious. The victors were not human. Towering alien forms moved across the scorched earth with an unshakable confidence. Their exoskeletons gleamed in the sun, their many eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of remaining opposition. The insectoids, with 6 powerful legs and spiked tails, stomped in rhythmic triumph. Reptilian creatures, scales glinting like polished stone, raised their arms in exultation. Cyborg soldiers, their metal limbs clanking with every movement, formed neat ranks, their glowing optics trained on the battlefield. The aliens roared. Their voices, harsh and alien to human ears, filled the plains like the sound of a storm. They danced and leapt, high-pitched screams of victory echoing through the valleys. To them, this battle was the final proof that they were supreme. Nothing could challenge their power. Nothing except the one species they thought had vanished long ago, humans. And yet, among the debris and carnage, a lone figure moved with quiet precision. He was small, almost fragile compared to the giants surrounding him, but his eyes burned with focus. He was dressed in a simple uniform, gray and practical, with light armor designed for mobility rather than brute protection. His movements were calm, deliberate, and almost invisible. To the celebrating aliens, he was nothing more than a shadow, a flicker in the corner of their vision, unworthy of attention. The human stopped at the edge of the battlefield. He crouched behind a shattered wall of alien armor, studying the scene carefully. The aliens' weapons, enormous energy cannons and plasma rifles, lay scattered or pointed at the sky, unused after the victory. Their command units, encased in thick metallic shells, were communicating with each other in bursts of electronic clicks and hums. The battlefield was chaotic, but in that chaos he saw opportunity. He took a deep breath, letting the smoke and dust fill his lungs. He had trained for this moment for years, learning the art of observation, strategy, and patience. Unlike the aliens, he did not rely on size, strength, or sheer numbers. His advantage was calculation. His mind was a weapon sharper than any blade, more precise than any cannon. One mistake by the enemy and the tide could turn. The aliens did not notice him. They were too busy celebrating, congratulating each other, and securing their spoils. A group of insectoids lifted a fallen banner, raising it high as a symbol of their victory. Reptilians danced around piles of alien technology scavenged from the battlefield. Cyborgs sent signals into orbit, calling their leaders to report the end of hostilities. Every movement, every cheer was an expression of confidence, arrogance even, in the finality of their win. The human watched it all, taking mental notes. He noted the placement of their leaders, the patterns in their movements, the way their forces spread across the field. His eyes flicked to a ridge where several heavy artillery units had been abandoned. Another ridge, covered with jagged metal, offered a natural choke point for any approaching enemy. A fallen alien transport vehicle could serve as cover, or a trap. Every detail mattered. Every weakness counted. He moved forward slowly, carefully, stepping over broken weapons and alien remains. Each step was calculated. He avoided areas where the aliens' optics might detect him, hugging shadows and staying behind terrain. The wind shifted, carrying a faint whiff of burnt chemicals, and he paused, listening. Nothing. He moved again. The battlefield was his chessboard, and he was about to make his first move. Meanwhile, in the heart of the alien ranks, the commanders gathered for a victory ritual. Their forms were massive, imposing, and clearly superior in strength and technology. One of the reptilian leaders, scales glittering with embedded gemstones, raised a clawed hand. "We have won," he hissed, voice booming across the field. "No enemy remains to challenge us. The humans are gone. They will not rise again." A cheer erupted, louder than before, echoing like a storm across the plains. Some of the insectoids danced in tight circles, chittering in excitement. The cyborgs aligned themselves into geometric formations, signaling dominance. To them, this was the end. The human hidden in the shadows smiled faintly. They were confident, arrogant, and blind to what he could do. He activated a small device on his wrist, a tool designed for reconnaissance and disruption. A subtle pulse emitted from it, barely noticeable to the naked eye but enough to interfere with alien sensors. The leaders paused. their eyes scanning the surroundings as if sensing something off. A flicker of confusion crossed their faces, or what could be called a face in their alien physiology. "Check the perimeter," one of the cyborg commanders ordered. "There might be stragglers. The humans. They may have survivors." The insectoid warriors laughed, clicking their mandibles. "Do you doubt the end of the human race?" one said. "They are nothing, weak, fragile. This battlefield is ours." The human's lips curved into a small smile. He moved closer, unseen, weaving through the debris. Every step was precise. Every shadow he passed became his ally. He did not rush. He did not panic. He had time. They did not. Suddenly, a young cyborg, less experienced and more curious than the rest, noticed a flicker in the distance, a shadow moving faster than the wind, quieter than a whisper. He raised his optic lens, zooming in. "Commander," he said, voice tinged with uncertainty. "Something is moving. Over there, near the wreckage." The leaders turned, their multifaceted eyes focusing on the area. For a brief moment, silence fell. Then the largest insectoid roared, "It is nothing, just debris moving in the wind. Celebrate. We have won." But the seed of doubt had been planted. A faint tension spread among the victors. They had never faced a human like this. One who did not flee, who did not surrender, who moved with purpose and intelligence. Their weapons were ready, but their minds hesitated. The human continued forward, now close enough to feel the heat from their energy weapons, close enough to hear the hum of their communication links. He paused behind a massive piece of alien armor, crouched low. His eyes scanned the battlefield, and he made a plan in a matter of seconds. A single human against thousands of aliens had to be clever. Direct confrontation would be suicide. But indirect strategy, deception, and precise strikes could create chaos. That chaos could turn the battlefield. From the ridge above, he observed their formations. The leaders were slightly exposed, communicating openly with each other. Troops were scattered, celebrating rather than guarding. Supply lines were loose, defenses weak. The human noted every detail, committing it to memory. He would strike where they least expected, where they were most confident, and then he took a step forward. Just one step. The aliens did not notice. The cheers continued. The banners waved. Smoke rose from the ground like a living curtain. Victory for the aliens was absolute. But as the human moved into the battlefield, the air seemed to shift. A subtle change, almost imperceptible, like the calm before a storm. The aliens were still celebrating, still confident, still blind. They had no idea that their triumph was about to be challenged by the very species they had declared extinct. For the first time in weeks, a new energy rippled through the battlefield. Not the chaotic energy of war, but the quiet, focused energy of a single human prepared to change everything. The human's eyes narrowed. This was only the beginning. The battlefield had grown quieter as the aliens began organizing their victory. Smoke curled in lazy spirals from the fires that still burned on the ground, and the heat of the sun reflected off shattered metal and scorched terrain. For the victorious alien species, the field was a symbol of their dominance. They moved with pride, collecting weapons, tending to the wounded, and reinforcing their temporary command points. They did not notice the human moving through the wreckage. He moved like a shadow, careful and deliberate, slipping past piles of debris and fallen warriors. His uniform was simple, designed for speed, camouflage, and mobility rather than protection. Each step was measured, each pause calculated. He was not in a hurry. His strength lay not in brute force, but in planning, observation, and anticipation. He paused behind a ruined alien transport, crouching low. Through the thick smoke, he studied the aliens' positions. The leaders were gathered near a ridge, speaking in clicks, hisses, and electronic signals. Troops roamed around them, some celebrating, others busy with their duties. The human noted everything: patrol patterns, weak points, even the timing of the aliens' communication pulses. Everything would matter. His device, strapped to his wrist, glimmered faintly as he activated it. A soft hum filled the air, imperceptible to alien ears but enough to interfere with their sensor systems. For a brief moment, a ripple passed through their equipment. Lights flickered, scanning optics twitched, and communication signals stuttered. "What is happening?" hissed one reptilian commander, scales glittering under the sun. "Check your systems. There is..." Interference, the insectoids clicked nervously. "Impossible. This battlefield is ours. Nothing remains that could..." But they did not finish their sentence. The human had already moved forward again, closer to the leaders, closer to the heart of their confidence. Each step was carefully planned. He was not rushing blindly. He was forcing them into uncertainty. One cyborg, more cautious than the others, raised its optics toward a flicker in the shadows. "Commander, something is moving," it said, voice trembling slightly. "Something small, but intelligent." The insectoid leaders laughed, a harsh echoing sound. "Intelligent? Ha, one human? We have destroyed their kind. We have won this war. There is no intelligence left to challenge us." The human smiled faintly, hidden behind the wreckage. They underestimated him, as they had underestimated humans before. But intelligence, he knew, could defeat numbers. Observation could defeat brute strength. Strategy could defeat confidence. He glanced at the ground, noting the placement of the fallen artillery units and shattered transport vehicles. With careful timing, he triggered a small device on the ground. A low pulse spread outward, subtle but effective, enough to cause several alien weapons to misfire temporarily. Sparks flew from a cyborg's arm cannon, and a nearby insectoid tripped over a piece of metal debris. Confusion rippled through the alien ranks. "What is happening?" hissed the reptilian leader, stepping forward. "All systems unstable." The human continued moving, weaving between debris. He used the battlefield itself as a tool. Fallen bodies, broken weapons, and jagged metal became both cover and traps. He knew the aliens' movements, their timing, their patterns. One mistake could cost them everything. Meanwhile, alien troops began to notice the strange disturbances. Communication signals were stuttering, their weapons misfiring, and their patrols detecting anomalies that seemed to move faster than anything they had encountered. Panic began to creep into their confidence. They had expected a clear path to victory, a celebration of power. Instead, they faced uncertainty, a small, unpredictable variable they could not control. The human paused behind a jagged piece of alien metal, studying a group of cyborgs moving in formation. He identified a weak point in their line. One of the younger cyborgs had a damaged sensor array and relied heavily on commands from its leader. A quick disruption here could create chaos in their formation. He adjusted his device, focusing the pulse toward that specific target. Sparks flew as the cyborg's sensors overloaded, causing it to stumble into its companions. Confusion spread quickly. One insectoid tripped over the fallen cyborg. Others collided in the chaos, and the leaders shouted orders that could no longer be followed precisely. "Stop this," hissed the reptilian commander, fury flashing in its eyes. "Find the intruder. Destroy it immediately." The human took advantage of the moment. He moved closer to the ridge where the leaders had gathered, careful to stay in shadows. From here he could observe them directly. The insectoids were confident, but small hints of hesitation were showing, tiny signs that confidence could be broken. He had no weapons for a frontal assault. He did not need them. His strength was in disruption, in creating fear, confusion, and uncertainty. With every pulse from his device, every calculated movement, the aliens felt the first real challenge they had faced in weeks. The humans they had assumed were weak, fragile, and long gone. Now one human was proving them wrong. From the ridge, a group of leaders tried to coordinate their troops. They sent signals, raised weapons, and attempted to regain control. But each command was met with interference. Communication channels flickered. Sensors misread the battlefield. Their troops began to stumble, unsure of where the intruder was. Panic began to take root, subtle at first, then growing. The human moved again, carefully, silently. He passed by a broken weapon cache and used it to his advantage. He triggered a small explosive, just enough to create noise and confusion, drawing a group of alien soldiers away from the leaders. They ran, shouting, only to find themselves trapped behind fallen vehicles and debris, unable to regroup. The insectoids and cyborgs had never faced such unpredictability. They relied on strength, numbers, and technology. One human had none of these in visible form, and yet the battlefield had shifted. Their victories felt fragile now, as though the ground beneath them had suddenly turned unstable. "Who is doing this?" hissed the reptilian commander, fury and fear in equal measure. "No human could survive the battles we have fought." The human crouched low, observing. He could almost hear their thoughts, confidence fading, replaced by doubt. And he knew with careful precision that doubt could be as dangerous as any weapon. One misstep, one hesitation, and their entire army could fall into chaos. He moved closer, aiming to disrupt the leaders directly. From behind a jagged piece of metal, he activated another pulse, targeting their communication systems. The leaders shouted orders, but the troops did not respond correctly. One insectoid tripped over a fallen banner, another collided with a cyborg. The battlefield was turning into a controlled chaos, orchestrated by a single human who had no visible weapons and no allies in sight. And then, something remarkable happened. A small group of alien scouts who had been celebrating separately noticed the disturbances. They attempted to intervene, but the human anticipated their approach. Using the terrain, he forced them into a narrow passage between ruined vehicles. Sparks flew, bodies collided, and the scouts were temporarily neutralized. Not killed, yet, but immobilized. The alien leaders were beginning to realize that their victory was fragile. For the first time, they were afraid not of death but of uncertainty. The battlefield was no longer theirs. The human had changed the rules. He was not just surviving. He was controlling the flow of battle without firing a single shot in anger. One cyborg commander, more analytical than the rest, spoke aloud in a voice tinged with disbelief. "This is impossible. One human, against us all?" The reptilian leader growled. "It does not matter. Kill it, find it. Do not allow it to survive. It must not live." But even as they shouted orders, the human was already moving. He had become a ghost, slipping through shadows, using the terrain, the debris, and the aliens' own confidence against them. Every step was precise, every action designed to maximize confusion. By the end of the day, the alien leaders realized something that chilled them to the core. They had celebrated too soon. Their victory, once absolute, was now under question. A single human, small, seemingly fragile, had demonstrated intelligence, precision, and courage beyond anything they had imagined. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield. The fires still burned, but their light was dim compared to the shadow that moved silently through the chaos. The human paused on a small ridge, observing the aliens below. They had power, strength, and technology, but he had one thing they could not match: ingenuity. And as night fell, the battlefield, once a monument to alien triumph, was no longer theirs. A single human had become the unexpected challenger, the variable that could change everything. Night had fallen on the battlefield, and the once celebrating aliens now moved with cautious unease. The fires from the day's chaos cast long shadows, twisting the broken terrain into shapes that seemed alive. Even in darkness, the battlefield was alive with the tension of uncertainty. The aliens had expected total victory. Now they were not so sure. The human crouched behind a mound of debris, observing the scattered alien forces. He had no heavy weapons, no armies at his back, yet he had managed to disrupt the enemy's confidence. One by one, the aliens' carefully planned routines had unraveled, and though they were still vastly stronger and larger than he was, the human knew that careful strategy, patience, and precise action could turn even overwhelming odds in his favor. He studied their positions, noting patterns and weak points. The leaders had tried to rally their troops, but confusion had spread like wildfire. Some soldiers were trapped among debris, others hesitated, unsure whether to attack or retreat, and the human was ready to exploit every single hesitation. He moved forward carefully, sticking to the shadows, using the burned-out vehicles and jagged remains of alien machinery for cover. Every step was calculated. He was not rushing. Speed was useless if it drew attention. Stealth, observation, and timing were his weapons. From the ridge above, the human could see a group of insectoid warriors patrolling near a makeshift barricade. Their movements were predictable, following a rhythm that had been repeated hundreds of times during the war. He memorized their pace, counted their steps, and planned a small disruption. Using a simple mechanical device, he set a trap near the barricade. A small spark, a subtle vibration, enough to make the patrolling insectoids stumble. One tripped over a jagged piece of metal, another crashed into a cyborg soldier. Confusion spread instantly. The human moved closer, slipping past the chaos unnoticed, as if he were a shadow moving across the battlefield. Meanwhile, alien leaders had gathered again near the central ridge. The reptilian commander's glowing eyes flickered with irritation. "This human, he cannot be. One of our scouts reports disturbances in multiple areas at once. He moves too quickly, strikes with precision. How is this possible? He is small, fragile. We have nothing to fear, hissed an insectoid leader. Surely this is only luck. He cannot survive the night among us. Luck, the human thought, was something the aliens misunderstood. Intelligence, strategy, and careful calculation were more powerful than any physical advantage. And in the shadows of the battlefield, he had plenty of those. He paused near the remains of an alien energy turret, noting its placement. With careful adjustments, he activated a small device that caused the turret to short-circuit. Sparks flew and a loud hum of malfunction spread across the area. A group of cyborg soldiers rushed to investigate, but their movements were clumsy in the dark. The human watched them stumble, memorizing every path they took, every weakness in their formation. Then he moved again, closer to the leaders. He did not plan to attack them physically. That would be foolish. Instead, he planned to manipulate their troops, create confusion, and isolate them. One wrong move from the leaders, one hesitation, and their army could collapse under its own disorder. In a narrow pass between fallen vehicles, he noticed a small group of alien reinforcements moving to intercept him. Rather than confronting them head-on, he used the terrain. He created noise behind them, metal scraping against metal, small flashes of light from his devices drawing their attention. The reinforcements turned, only to find the path he had just left empty. He slipped away unnoticed while they surged futilely. The human's mind worked quickly, constantly calculating. He anticipated the aliens' strategies and countered them before they could act. Every movement, every signal, every device he triggered was designed to destabilize their confidence. He was like a conductor directing a symphony of confusion, and the aliens, despite their size and technology, were falling into his rhythm. From the ridge, the leaders shouted orders, their voices tinged with frustration and disbelief. Find him. He cannot be alone. Kill him before he destroys everything. But the human had already moved again. He used small mechanical devices to create illusions, shadows that moved like soldiers, sounds that mimicked footsteps. Alien troops fell for them repeatedly, chasing after ghosts, unaware of the true threat moving among them. Hours passed, and the human continued his careful assault on the battlefield. Each action was deliberate, each disruption precise. Slowly, alien confidence was eroding. The leaders were forced to retreat behind stronger barricades, their troops increasingly disorganized. Confusion spread like wildfire. Orders were ignored, weapons misfired, and formations broke apart. The human paused near a fallen command vehicle, crouching behind a half-collapsed wall. He could see the reptilian leader struggling to maintain control. The insectoids were agitated, the cyborgs frustrated. The human's plan was working. By manipulating the battlefield and the aliens' perceptions, he had made them vulnerable without ever confronting them directly. From a distance, he noticed a smaller group of human survivors. They had been hiding throughout the war, small cells scattered across the planet. Though they were few, he signaled them subtly, letting them know that the field was not lost. A spark of hope passed between them, a reminder that humanity, though small and underestimated, could endure. The alien leaders, sensing the tide turning, began to regroup. They called for reinforcements, but the human had anticipated this. He moved quickly to intercept the narrow corridors the reinforcements would take, creating obstacles, traps, and diversions. One by one, the reinforcements stumbled into confusion, slowing their advance and giving the human control over key parts of the battlefield. He did not fight in the traditional sense. He did not need to. Every misstep the aliens took, every moment of hesitation was an advantage. He was patient, methodical, and always thinking several moves ahead. Where the aliens relied on brute force, he relied on ingenuity. Where they trusted numbers, he trusted strategy. And in the darkness of the battlefield, he was unstoppable. At one point, the reptilian commander realized the scale of their predicament. "This is impossible," he hissed. One human. How can one human control this battlefield? The human crouched behind a jagged mound, listening to their communications. He smiled faintly. They could not understand. They never had. Humans were underestimated for their size, their strength, and their numbers, but they had something the aliens could not match: creativity, intelligence, and the ability to adapt. Using small pulses from his device, he caused several alien communications arrays to fail. Orders were delayed, confusion spread further. Troops began to panic, unsure of where to go or who to follow. He watched their reactions, learning their weaknesses, and preparing his next moves. By the time the first light of dawn touched the battlefield, the human had achieved what no alien could have imagined. Their formations were broken, leaders isolated, and morale shattered. The aliens had fought in confidence the day before, but now they faced chaos orchestrated by a single determined human. And yet, the human did not stop. He continued moving carefully, ensuring that every area he passed through remained in confusion. He was not seeking glory, only control. He was not seeking destruction, only to turn the battlefield into a place where the aliens' assumptions no longer applied. The aliens, despite their strength, were beginning to fear. Fear of an enemy they had dismissed, fear of a species they had thought extinct, fear of a single human who refused to yield, who moved like a shadow and who used intelligence as a weapon more powerful than any cannon. The sun rose higher, casting its light over the battlefield. The fires from the night still burned, sending smoke curling into the sky, and at the center of it all, moving silently, methodically, and with unyielding determination, was the human. The aliens had expected a simple end, a victory unchallenged. Instead, they faced the impossible. One human outmatched in every physical sense, yet capable of reshaping the entire battlefield through ingenuity, courage, and strategy. The day was far from over. The human's journey had only begun. The aliens had underestimated him. They had assumed weakness where there was strength, fragility where there was resilience, and absence where there was presence. And that mistake would cost them dearly. As the human moved forward, his eyes scanning the battlefield, he whispered to himself, almost as if to reassure the hidden human still alive, "This is only the beginning. They will learn. They will all learn." The battlefield had changed. What had once been a place of alien victory now pulsed with uncertainty. Fires from the night still burned, sending smoke twisting into the sky, but the aliens no longer moved with confidence. Their ranks were broken, communications disrupted, and their morale shattered. Yet they still held numbers, weapons, and size advantages that could have crushed any ordinary enemy. But the human on the field was far from ordinary. He crouched atop a ridge, observing the alien leaders huddled near the remains of their command center. The reptilian commander, scales glinting with embedded gemstones, glared at his troops. His voice was low but sharp. "We underestimated this human. Every move he makes is calculated. We are not prepared for this." The insectoid leader clicked his mandibles nervously. "He is only one. Yet he has undone our orders. How can one human control the battlefield so completely?" One cyborg, standing rigidly, adjusted its optics. "He is not only intelligent," it said in a cold, mechanical tone. "He adapts faster than our predictions. Our systems cannot anticipate his next moves." The human watched them, a faint smile forming on his lips. He did not need brute strength. He did not need armies. He needed only strategy, timing, and the ability to predict their errors, and the leaders in their arrogance had given him everything he needed. He moved quietly down the ridge, approaching a small group of alien soldiers guarding a supply cache. The soldiers had regained some confidence after the initial night's chaos, but they were unaware of the traps he had set in the surrounding area. He used a small device to create a controlled malfunction in their energy weapons. Sparks flew, confusion erupted, and in the ensuing chaos the human slipped past undetected. From a nearby hill, the alien leaders watched, alarm growing in their voices. "Contain him!" hissed the reptilian commander. "Do not let him reach the ridge." The human had anticipated this. He did not plan to engage them directly yet. Instead, he would force them into mistakes, isolate their units, and create chaos in their formations. He moved to a narrow pass between fallen vehicles, where alien reinforcements were attempting to regroup. Using small devices and clever positioning, he set off a series of distractions, flashes of light, bursts of noise, and subtle pulses that interfered with sensors. The reinforcements panicked, colliding with each other and creating a bottleneck. Some fell, others tripped, and the human used the confusion to move closer to the alien leaders. He was careful, patient, invisible to all but the sharpest eyes. A young cyborg spotted a flicker near the edge of the smoke. "Commander! Over there!" "He moves again." The reptilian leader growled, frustration mixing with fear. "Do not let him escape." He cannot survive the battlefield alone. But the human had no intention of surviving as they expected. He intended to dominate the battlefield without ever confronting them head-on. Using the narrow passes, he manipulated their movements, forcing them to isolate themselves from their troops. One by one, alien units were separated, trapped, and neutralized, not destroyed but rendered ineffective. From the ridge, the leaders attempted to coordinate, but their communications continued to fail. Each order was delayed, misinterpreted, or ignored. The insectoids began colliding with each other. Their natural confidence shattered. The cyborg sensors misread positions, sending units in the wrong directions. And the reptilians, despite their size and strength, were forced to retreat to stronger positions. The human paused for a moment, watching the chaos he had created. He did not celebrate. He did not need to. The battlefield itself had become his weapon. Every weak point he identified, every hesitation he exploited had turned the tide. The aliens, who had celebrated only 2 nights ago, now moved like soldiers unsure of their own strength. He moved again, this time toward the central ridge where the alien leaders had gathered. This was the moment to create a decisive shift. Using a combination of subtle devices and precise observation, he created illusions of attacks on multiple fronts. Flashes of light, bursts of sound, and subtle energy pulses caused confusion among the leader's personal guards. One insectoid commander tripped over a fallen beam, colliding with a cyborg soldier. Sparks flew from the cyborg's arm, causing more confusion. The reptilian leader hissed angrily, attempting to reorganize his troops, but his orders were too late. The human had already predicted his movements. In the distance, small signals from other human survivors flickered faintly. The human on the ridge acknowledged them subtly. His actions were not just for survival. They were a message. Humanity was not gone. Humanity could endure, adapt, and challenge even the most powerful species. Using the chaos he had created, the human carefully lured the alien leaders into a narrow canyon. He had studied the terrain for days, memorizing every ridge, every fallen structure, and every possible advantage. The canyon was a trap, not deadly in itself, but strategically perfect. As the leaders entered, they found themselves isolated from their main forces. The humans' devices created interference with their sensors, and the illusions of attacks caused them to misjudge distances and positions. The insectoids hissed, confused, and the cyborgs struggled to coordinate. The reptilian commander growled, realizing too late that he had walked into the human's plan. From the shadows, the human moved silently. He did not attack directly. Instead, he manipulated their perception. Energy pulses caused their weapons to malfunction briefly. Sound devices simulated reinforcements where there were none, and small lights flickered like movement in the darkness. The leaders, despite their size and experience, were forced to act cautiously. Every step was uncertain. Every decision had to be measured, and in that uncertainty the human found his advantage. By isolating them and disrupting their systems, he forced the leaders to make errors. The insectoids collided with each other, the cyborgs misfired, and the reptilian commander's attempts to coordinate failed repeatedly. One by one, the alien units became trapped in confusion of their own making, manipulated by the strategic mind of a single human. Hours passed as the human continued his methodical control of the battlefield. By now, even the strongest alien leaders had begun to doubt themselves. They were frustrated, exhausted, and unsure of what to do next. And yet they still underestimated the human. They saw him as one, small and fragile, incapable of directly challenging their power. But it was precisely their underestimation that allowed him to dominate. By mid-morning, the human had achieved what no alien could have imagined. Their forces were scattered, leaders isolated, and key positions disrupted. The battlefield, which had once been a monument to alien victory, now belonged to the human strategy. He had not fought with brute force, but with intelligence, patience, and ingenuity. From a small rise, he observed the aftermath. Alien soldiers stumbled through the chaos. Leaders shouted orders that could not be followed, and their confidence had evaporated. The human had turned the tide not with numbers, but with planning. He had made the battlefield unpredictable, dangerous, and chaotic for the very species that had thought themselves supreme. And yet the human did not pause. He moved carefully, ensuring that each disruption had lasting effect. He set small devices to maintain interference, traps to delay reinforcements, and illusions to continue confusing the leaders. Every detail was precise. Every action deliberate. The alien leaders, realizing the extent of their predicament, gathered again on the ridge. The reptilian commander's eyes glowed with fury. "We have underestimated him. He has manipulated our forces. We cannot allow this." But it was too late. The human had already planned the next phase. He would continue to isolate the leaders, disrupt their troops, and force them into positions where they could not act effectively. One by one, he was proving that intelligence and strategy could overcome size, strength, and numbers. By the afternoon, the battlefield had completely shifted. The aliens were no longer victorious. They were cautious, fearful, and uncertain. The human had taken control not by direct combat, but by creating chaos and exploiting weakness. He had become the turning point in a war they thought was over. And in the shadows of the canyon, moving silently, the human paused for a moment. He looked at the alien leaders, trapped and confused, and whispered to himself, almost like a quiet promise to the remaining humans, "This is only the beginning. They will learn. They will all learn." The battlefield, once a monument to alien triumph, now bore the mark of human ingenuity. A single human had demonstrated that even against overwhelming odds, patience, intelligence, and strategy could change the course of history. The aliens had won the day yesterday, but today they were learning the true power of humanity. The battlefield was quiet now, but the silence was tense. Alien soldiers moved cautiously, their once bold steps slowed by uncertainty and fear. The fires from previous battles still burned, smoke rising into the morning sky like dark ribbons. The sun cast its first light across the wreckage, revealing twisted metal, shattered vehicles, and scorched earth. It was a place of destruction, yet in that destruction, one human stood unmoved, calm, and determined. The human crouched behind, a fallen energy turret observing the alien leaders who had gathered atop a ridge. The reptilian commander's eyes glowed with fury, his scales shimmering in the sunlight. The insectoid leader clicked his mandibles nervously, a sound that usually indicated confidence, but now only reflected uncertainty. Even the cyborg commanders, precise and calculated in every movement, paused, unsure of the battlefield's new rules. The human had done more than disrupt. He had created control, shaping the battlefield without firing a single lethal shot directly at the leaders. His devices had caused confusion, misdirection, and delays, forcing the aliens to act in ways that left them vulnerable. Now he planned the final phase, a move that would ensure the battlefield and its leaders were completely within his influence. He observed their positions. The leaders were isolated, cut off from their main forces by the chaos he had created. Some units were trapped in narrow corridors of debris, others had turned back, uncertain where to go. Supplies were scattered and communication links remained unstable. The human had orchestrated all of this patiently, deliberately, predicting every reaction. From his vantage point, he activated a new device, a small, precise tool designed not to destroy, but to simulate attacks from multiple directions. Pulses of energy radiated outward, causing weapon systems to misfire, sensors to flicker, and movement patterns to become unpredictable. The alien leaders froze, struggling to interpret what they were seeing. "Impossible," hissed the reptilian commander. "We cannot be attacked from all sides at once. There is only one human. How can this be?" The human moved silently through the shadows, closer to the ridge. His presence was unseen, his steps unheard. The leaders believed they could track him, but every illusion, every disruption, had been designed to manipulate their perception. They were panicked, forced to make decisions based on false information. And in that panic, he held the advantage. One insectoid warrior, attempting to guard the leaders, tripped over a fallen beam. Sparks flew from a nearby cyborg weapon, and suddenly, the leader's immediate protection was compromised. The reptilian commander barked orders, but they were ignored or misunderstood. Confusion spread, the battlefield becoming a controlled chaos orchestrated by a single human. The human paused momentarily, taking in the scene. He was tired, yes, his movements had been precise for hours, but he was far from done. The human spirit thrived not in comfort, but in challenge. Against overwhelming odds, he had persevered, and now the final step awaited. Using small calculated pulses from his device, he created subtle flashes of light behind the leaders, simulating reinforcements where none existed. The insectoids, panicked, clicking wildly. And even the cyborgs misinterpreted the energy patterns. One by one, alien units began withdrawing, unable to trust their own senses. The leaders were forced to make critical decisions without accurate information, and then the human moved to the open ridge, finally visible, yet still commanding control through his strategic mind rather than brute force. He did not raise a weapon. He did not charge. He simply stood, calm, and surveyed the battlefield. His presence alone caused hesitation. For the first time, the alien leaders realized that this human was not just clever, he was fearless. The reptilian commander hissed, trying to rally his troops. "Attack him! Do not let him survive. He is only one human." But the soldiers hesitated. Confusion had spread too far and confidence had crumbled. The illusions and disruptions had worked perfectly. Even the most disciplined units were unable to follow orders effectively. Panic and caution slowed them, while the human remained in complete control of the battlefield's flow. The human spoke, his voice calm but commanding. "Enough. You have fought. You have celebrated. And you have underestimated humanity. Now it ends. Stand down or continue and lose control entirely." His words carried weight, not through threat but through certainty. The aliens, despite their size and power, felt an unfamiliar emotion, fear of an enemy they could not overpower, a species they had dismissed as weak. The leaders paused, weighing their options. Their technology was advanced, their numbers vast, but the human's intellect had outmaneuvered them at every turn. For a moment, silence fell. The only sounds were the crackle of distant fires and the hum of malfunctioning machinery. Then slowly, the insectoid leader lowered his claws. The cyborg commanders powered down part of their systems, and even the reptilian commander, reluctantly, signaled a halt to their scattered troops. The battlefield, once a monument to alien victory, now belonged to the human. The human exhaled quietly, but he did not celebrate. His task was not to destroy, but to demonstrate that humanity could endure, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Slowly, he moved down the ridge toward the alien leaders, carefully observing their reactions. They did not attack. They had learned caution in a way that no battle drills could teach. Small signals from human survivors flickered across the battlefield, hidden groups who had been observing the chaos. The human acknowledged them subtly. His actions were not only about victory today, but about hope. Humanity, though few in number, still existed. They were not defeated. They had endured. And now they had a symbol. One human who had outwitted thousands. The alien leaders gathered. Themselves, their pride wounded, their confidence shattered. The reptilian commander, finally understanding the extent of his misjudgment, hissed in quiet fury. "One human. One insignificant human has undone everything we believed about strength." The human's eyes softened, not with anger, but with resolve. He understood their frustration. It was proof of his strategy's success. He raised his hand slowly, not in threat, but in gesture of control. "You have strength, and you have numbers," he said calmly. "But strength without intelligence is fragile. You have learned today what it means to underestimate humanity." He stepped forward deliberately. Alien soldiers tensed, unsure whether to attack, but hesitation ruled. The human did not move faster than necessary. His calm presence was a challenge greater than any weapon. One by one, alien leaders recognized that they could no longer dominate this battlefield. Control had shifted, not through destruction, but through strategy, ingenuity, and courage. Across the field, alien troops began withdrawing from positions they had claimed as victories. Confusion and exhaustion dictated their movements. Even the most disciplined units faltered, and the human's influence was complete. The battlefield, once theirs, was now a testament to the resilience of a single human, and by extension, humanity itself. The human moved through the battlefield, silently checking the remnants of alien forces. No unnecessary destruction, no unnecessary violence. His goal had never been annihilation, but demonstration. Humans were not weak, fragile, or extinct. They were intelligent, resourceful, and unyielding. They adapted where others assumed dominance. They endured where others assumed weakness. The reptilian commander approached cautiously, recognizing the human's dominance. "Why do you spare us?" he hissed. "We could destroy you." The human looked at him steadily. "I do not need to destroy you. You will remember this day, and it will change how you view humanity. That is enough." The alien leaders exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, they understood the truth. Humans were not creatures to be underestimated. Strength could be challenged, size could be countered, numbers could be outwitted. And the battlefield, once a monument to alien victory, stood as a symbol of what could happen when intellect, courage, and determination combined. Slowly, the human began moving toward the edge of the battlefield. He paused, looking back at the chaos he had orchestrated. The alien leaders were still present, subdued, cautious, and aware that the victory they had celebrated was hollow. His message was clear. Humans were survivors, humans were thinkers, and humans could overcome any odds. In the distance, small human groups emerged from hiding. Engineers, scouts, and fighters who had remained in secret now stepped forward, emboldened by the human who had challenged thousands. They moved carefully, inspired by the courage and ingenuity they had witnessed. Humanity, though small, had a chance to rise again. The human took one last look at the battlefield, now quiet and controlled. The fires still burned, the smoke still twisted into the sky, but the fear and uncertainty he had instilled remained. He knew this was only the beginning. The aliens had learned a lesson. Humans were not weak. Humans were clever, resilient, and unyielding. As he walked away, silhouetted against the rising sun, the battlefield behind him became a symbol, not of defeat, not of destruction, but of the power of humanity. One human had faced thousands, had outwitted them, and had demonstrated the indomitable spirit of his species. And in that moment, the world seemed to change. The alien leaders would never again underestimate humanity. The survivors would rebuild, stronger and wiser. And the memory of one human, calm, clever, and